Well, okay, great. I think we can get started. And just so you all know, this is being recorded. So I understand if you prefer to have your camera off, but it's just going for our YouTube channel so that other people, if they miss it, can watch the Tutor Talk. So let me share my screen and get us going. So, hello, my name is Maya, and I will be giving the Tutor Talk today. It's also my first Tutor Talk, so be kind. And our topic today is citizenship. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am teaching a intermediate level citizenship class. We meet Tuesdays and Thursday evenings over Zoom. So Zoom can be a challenge, but we're all learning, adapting to it. And then my day job, I am the Squirrel Hill, Oakland, Munhall, that area of Pittsburgh. I'm the program coordinator. So in that capacity, I make matches, I give English tests, and I support tutors and students. I've also included my contact information on this slide. Please feel free to reach out to me with any, additional questions or if there's anything that I can help with. Yes, Norma.
Yes, you said that you teach a citizenship class on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Does that mean that if my student or I wanted to jump in and listen, that we could do that?
Sure, yeah. And your student is Jose, correct, Ibarra?
Correct.
Yeah, I met with him and I think I mentioned that I have this class. So
I don't know.
hopefully
He doesn't work in the daytime, but he helps his daughter take care. He and his wife help their daughter take care of the grandchildren during the day. But I may get some thoughts from your class for my class.
Yeah, no, please, if you'd like to join us, yes.
So what time and would you email me the Zoom the Zoom link to it?
Yeah, sure. Let me make a note of that. It's 5:30 to 7:30, but sometimes we end closer to 7, depending on the content, how many questions there are.
Yeah, Thursday wouldn't work, but Tuesday might. So are you using Voices of Freedom?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just make a note to send you the Zoom link for next week. And I will be talking a bit more about the resources, and we'll get more into Voices of Freedom later. But first, I'd just like to hear from all of you, just what your name is, how long have you been tutoring, and how familiar are you with the naturalization process? Do you know anyone who's applied for citizenship or is currently waiting for their interview? Maybe we can start with you, Norma, at the top.
Well, I don't, I have a friend who lives in Kuwait, and his daughter has dual citizenship, Egyptian and American, but her 2 daughters are applying for citizenship because they want to come here and study in the United States. They've applied for their green cards. I'm not, because they're very fluent in English, they go to a British kind of school there. They speak English most of the day. I really don't know what testing they have to take. So I really, I've been tutoring Jose for about a year and a half, and before that I had a student only for 6 weeks, and I don't even know if she continued. Her name was Dalal. So I really don't know much about the naturalization process.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get into it today. Thank you. Maybe Sarah next.
Sure. My name is Sarah, and I've been tutoring a Chinese refugee, asylee, I believe, for about 4 years here in the South Hills. And she is getting ready, I think, to to move toward applying for citizenship, she and her husband. I don't know a lot about exactly where they are in the process, nor am I familiar with the process, but I thought that this was a topic that I should learn a little more about. I know she's talked to Miranda a little bit about wanting to move in that direction.
Great, great. Thank you. Susan?
I am Susan. I have been tutoring for 2 years. My student, who is a citizenship student, declared she wanted to be announced a citizen about a year ago. So, and I think she has some learning disabilities and whatever. So we're still ironing that out, but we're actually getting to where I think I'm figuring out how to best serve her brain. Her situation is really complicated. So all of the adult education things with attendance and whatever else happen. She's married to a citizen, so there isn't the tight time frame that happens when you normally, I think you have like 5 years after you get your green card or something. But she's married to a citizen, so I understand she's not subject to that time limit. I really don't know a whole lot about the naturalization process. I mean, I've been hearing about it all my life. I have friends and including a brother-in-law who's become a citizen, but I've never like walked with someone through the process. I also went to a tutor talk back at the beginning, right after she expressed interest in becoming a citizenship, but I'm needing a refresher.
Yeah, yeah, great. Thank you. How about Deb? How are you? And just for attendance purposes, Deb, could I have your last name as well?
Hi. I'm Deb. I've been tutoring since October. I have 3 students. One is a political asylee, and he's in the process of becoming a citizen, I believe, or getting his, well, I don't know enough about the process to really state where he is, but he has an attorney and he is working through all that. He's also trying to get some of his minor children over here. And I also have 2 Brazilian students. One is living with her daughter now here, and she would like to become a citizen. And the other is here for work purposes with her husband. And I do not think they intend to become citizens.
Okay, great. Thank you. Lucinda?
Can you guys see me okay?
Hi.
Okay, sorry at the car background here between places for work today. Lucinda Morgan, I've been tutoring for, I guess, about 6 months to a group of 5 people from Afghanistan that arrived in the past year or so in the US. I'm not super familiar with what they're doing process-wise, and with their English level, they're not ready yet to explain it in English to me. But I work also at the University of Pittsburgh for the School of Nursing and International Affairs. So I work with our international students and international faculty and visiting scholars. So I know bits and pieces, and I've worked in the immigration office before at another university, but just thought this would be great to get a refresher on any like changes in the past couple of years to the naturalization process and all of that. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And Megan.
Hi, I'm driving. That's why my video is off.
That's okay.
And I have been teaching for about 8 months. I also have refugees from Afghanistan. And I feel like the more I learn about the citizenship process, the less I realize I know. So I'm here to educate myself.
No, I agree with you. You know, I'm only in my 2nd round of teaching citizenship, and I feel like every class I'm learning a little bit more. Thank you. And Miranda, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Miranda. I am the South Hills Program Coordinator for Literacy Pittsburgh. So some of you are familiar with me. I have been in the position for about 4 months now, and I'm loving it, loving every day. But I certainly have become more familiar with the naturalization process since working for Literacy Pittsburgh. But most of my questions end up going to Maya or Roberta, who teaches the other section of citizenship classes. So I am very happy to be learning more today.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's, the one thing I've really learned that it gets very complicated, and to also know my limits. Like I do referrals to JFCS, our Jewish Family and Community Services, which is a partnership Literacy Pittsburgh has, and they are like a great team of immigration, visa lawyers. And so I'll say this as well later in the talk, but there's some things that it's best just to tell the student, talk to your lawyer about that, because, I'm just the coordinator, I don't have a legal background.
Can I
So
ask? Yeah.
yes.
So my student recently said that their lawyer is leaving Pittsburgh. So their immigration lawyer they've been working with. So she doesn't really know how to find another lawyer. Can you help her with that?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, if you'd like to, you can send me an email with her full name and a way to contact her. And we have
Okay.
one of the departments at Literacy Pittsburgh is called Isaac, which stands for Immigrant Services and Connections. And I just did a referral to them earlier this afternoon for one of my students who needs help applying for his green card and help with his asylum process. And so it's really great because if we do the referral, the wait time is significantly less than
Okay.
if your student just emailed JFCS herself. So we can definitely get her help so that there's not, a drop in care in her application.
Yeah, because she thinks that there's a court date coming up within the year.
Oh, well then
So
definitely.
she needs somebody.
Certainly, yeah. And hopefully her lawyer could also, refer maybe someone else at their practice or.
That's what I said. And
Yeah.
she seemed to say no, that he
Huh.
gave her the choice of getting her records or I don't know.
Yeah.
So
She should definitely get her records, just so that if he does, disappear, that she has all of those files that then she can bring to a new lawyer so that they're not starting from scratch, That would be
Right.
my best guess.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll copy Miranda on that too, since she's the South Hills person.
Great, great.
Perfect.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
If any of this, for everyone, if any of this kind of information comes to you and you don't know what to do, email your coordinator. We have all the resources, and we're happy to help with anything that may come up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Right. Okay. So just a brief overview about what we'll be talking about today. The first, we'll be looking at the pathway to citizenship. How is a student eligible and what are the steps they need to take in order to, cross that finish line, finish at the Oath of Allegiance ceremony. Then we'll take a deeper dive into the test. We'll look at the 4 components of the test. We'll also look at the document called the N400. I have that one printed out here that they will have to fill out, as well as we'll take a look at some of the questions on the test, the civics portion. We'll also talk about some of the resources that we use, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. But of course, please stop me if you have questions as we go. I know if I don't ask a question immediately, it is gone from my brain in 5 minutes. So please just let me know. All right, so first we're going to start with the eligibility requirements. The only one that is, universal is they must be over 18 years old. The process, if, I've had some students in my citizenship class say, well, I have children. What's the process for them? There is a process, it's just different. And I'm not as familiar with it, as all of our students are adults, but if any of your students or anyone expresses an interest in helping their children become a citizen, it is a shorter process. I don't believe they have to take the same tests, but I can also refer them in the right path for that. And then there's 2 other main ways that a student can be eligible. that they have their permanent residency card or their green card, as we commonly call it, for 5 years, or they are either married to a US citizen or they are in the US military and they have had their green card for 3 years. And, it's not something that, as soon as they hit that 5-year mark, if they haven't applied for citizenship, something bad happens. I have some students who have had their green card for 10 years or more, and, or even I have some students who have had their green card for 4 or 3 years, and they're just really getting ready so that they can take that test as soon as the 5-year mark hits. It's different for every student. And my advice is that, you want to take the test when you're confident and when you're ready. You're able to take the test 2 times. So I think it's better just to be fully prepared on that first go round, So then this is getting more into how you pass your interview. And the first thing that the officer is looking for is that they are of good moral character, which in my opinion seems incredibly ambiguous. So how do they ascertain this? They're looking over their answers to the N400, which is this 20-page document that the student must fill out. And we'll look at it a little bit closer in a bit. But they're going to be looking over their answers, and they also will be doing a background check. This, of course, is to make sure that all of their answers that they gave on their N400 are correct. Then they will also look to see if the student has demonstrated a knowledge of the English language and civics. So they do this in the small talk and the student's ability to answer the civics questions correctly and intelligibly. And then finally, they must take the oath of allegiance to the United States. This is the last step. So once the student has their interview and the interviewer will say, so yes, I am recommending you for citizenship, for naturalization. Then the next step is a separate date later on where they will go back to, I think they've often had it at the courthouse, to take the oath of allegiance, which is when they don't have to memorize anything, but the one person will say one sentence and then the group will have to repeat it. And it's a pretty lengthy paragraph, but they will, have to raise their right hand and essentially swear an oath of allegiance. And that is the final step. And after that ceremony, only then the applicant will be considered a US citizen. Okay, so it is a long process. I just looked on the Pittsburgh office's total estimated wait time, and it was around 8 months. But, I was watching a previous Tutor Talk on citizenship that our director of special programs, Nicole, gave, who's in charge of the citizenship program. And when she did it several months ago, it was around 13 months. So the total waiting period really does fluctuate depending, I think it was much longer in 2020, 2021, 2022 with the pandemic. So I think, well, at least I hope that now we're really sort of getting over these, time delays and hurdles that the pandemic caused. But the first step is that the student should tell their teacher or coordinator when they are ready to apply. This is because we can refer them for free legal help. And this would be with a JFCS or Jewish Family and Community Services lawyer. And they can help them complete the N400 application. Well, let me rephrase that. The student must complete the N400 by themselves. This is not the only time I will say this in this talk, because it's really, really important. The student must complete it alone. However, there's a lot of tricky things on this document. I help them with understanding the vocabulary, but their lawyer can help advise them on ways to answer. Then they will also have to pay a fee. It's around $750, $780, maybe closer to $800. And they may be eligible for a fee waiver. This is depending on their household income and information like that. And their JFCS lawyer can help them apply for that fee waiver because it is a lot of money. And then the applicant will send in their N-400 form. Then they will receive a notice of receipt. And I always recommend that students save this because this could take 3 months or more. And with that document, they know that their application has been received and is beginning to be processed. So I always recommend they keep that for their records in case, 5 months later, they haven't heard anything, then they can refer back to that. And then they will be contacted to make a biometrics appointment. So this is fingerprints, and at this time, the office will also begin the FBI background check. Then there is a waiting period, which could be anywhere between 4 to 12 months. Right now, as I said, the total time is around 8 months. So this waiting period should be on the lower end, but this can really, fluctuate office to office, month to month. They will then be scheduled for their interview, which we will talk about in a moment. If they fail in the interview, they can then schedule an appointment for a retest. And I should also mention that they will only have to retake the portion of the test that they failed. So if they passed everything but the writing, they will only have to do the writing section. So this is, much less work, and then they can really, refocus on only that part before their second interview. And then once they pass, they will attend the oath of allegiance ceremony, after which they will be considered a US citizen. Okay, does anyone have any questions about this timeline? Yes, Susan.
I'm just curious, what documentation do they get other than the notice of receipt? Like, when they, I'm assuming they get some sort of paperwork if they fail, and they have to repeat part or all of it. Do they get something when their biometric appointment? I guess they get something in writing while they're doing the background check, but what can you clarify?
Yeah, I'm not completely sure, but I would think that they're getting, that everything they're mailed, to get the biometrics appointment or email. They're probably asked to choose a method. But I am not completely sure how it's all documented. I do know. I was just gonna say, I know that when they have their interview, that they're given, some paperwork, both if they fail or if they pass, just with, stamped. Here you go.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to say? Sorry.
All done, on the day of the ceremony. Do they get something, or
like a certificate of?
Yeah.
I believe so, because I think, they have to hand in their green card, and then they'll get a certificate of naturalization, I believe it is called. I was trying to think about if I have a card that says I'm a citizen, but I don't. My mother has lost my social card as well. So as a side note, I just remembered that. I'm not too sure, but I would say yes, that they get, and they're probably mailed something, with more information after the fact.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So there are, oh yes, Norma.
I have several questions. One, what happens if they fail it the second time?
Yeah, I was actually reading into that, And on the USCIS government, they did not explicitly say, you know, that you only get 2 times, but that was my impression from the website, is that but I'm not sure, to be honest.
Secondly, how does it, if they don't already have a social security now, I mean, Jose has one, my student does, but what if they don't already have a social security number? May they apply? How do they apply for one if they don't have can they do it by applying it with their green card?
I do not know. I'm going to start keeping track of these.
And third, my student plans to take a commercial driver's test so that he can become a bus driver.
Mm-hmm.
Does he, the question that was asked before about a card certifying that he's a citizen, they may ask for some kind of proof of citizenship. And I'm wondering if he will get something like that so that he doesn't have to schlep his certificate of naturalization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would think that, you know, before he becomes a citizen, that his green card would, you know, it gives him the right to work. So that should be like an adequate form on his CDL application.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, Deb, the USCIS government site does have a lot of information. Let me see, because I had it pulled up.
It says a certificate of citizenship is optional, but it can be obtained. It also says that a US passport is notification that you're a US citizen.
Thank you. And then I'm looking also at the failure to meet the English or civics requirements. And, you know, they say that the USCIS reschedules for a second examination between 60 and 90 days. And in cases where, you know, the applicant fails a second time, the officer must deny the application based upon the applicant's failure to meet the educational requirements. So it doesn't go into a third time, or if there's any other, you know, if they have to wait a certain amount of time. So it seems like they get 2 chances, but I will check into that more. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm taking note, and I will write these down, and I will send out an email to everyone once I have learned the answers to these questions. Because boy, oh boy, is it complicated. There's a lot of information. So for right now, I should mention that USCIS is considering changing the naturalization exam, but it is in very early stages of suggesting how it could change. I know one of the suggestions is to make everything digital. So it would be more like this, more of a reading test than a speaking and listening, but that has not been finalized. So today I will be talking about how the test is in its current form. If USCIS does make major changes to the test, we will give another tutor talk about all the updates. But for right now, the citizenship test is made up of 4 sections, which is the interview in the speaking and listening components, a civics test, a reading test, and a writing test. So starting with the interview is when the officer is asking the applicant questions about their answers to the N400. I also want to emphasize that the test really begins from the jump, from the waiting room. So with my students in class, we practice these sort of pre-interview questions, such as, how did you get here today? How are you? Did you come alone? Who came with you? The weather's nice, isn't it? These sorts of small talk. And you may not hear the phrasing of the question, how did you get here today, very often. And so we try and go over these little small talk questions that the officer will be asking the applicant, on their way from the waiting room to the office, because that's really when the judgment of their English begins. And so the speaking and listening component is the questions about the N400. And not only are they trying to ascertain if the applicant can speak and understand English, they're also trying to determine if the applicant is telling the truth. If the answers that they gave on their N400 align with the answers that they're giving verbally in response to these questions. And so what I always tell my students is, tell the truth. And as we look in closer detail at some of these questions, some of them seem like you must say no to everyone. But it's, if the question is, have you ever, had been involved with like law enforcement or had an interaction with police, even if you think, well, I should just say no, because even though I got a speeding ticket in 2008, blah, 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 always tell the truth, because they will find out, and telling the truth is better than them catching the applicant in a lie. And the applicant may ask the interviewer to repeat or rephrase or slow down. We encourage this because it shows that the student, is listening, is understanding, and is working to understand, So the application for naturalization is called the Form N400. It's about 20 pages, and it is so important that the students fill it out themselves. Because if you help them fill it out and there's anything incorrect on their form, you could potentially be held liable for that. And, you don't want that. So we really just want to hammer it in that the students must fill it out for themselves. So in class, we talk about what the questions mean, but I never say, this is what you should answer. They can talk with their lawyer, if they're unsure of how to answer something on a more case-by-case basis, but you should never be filling it out for them. And we're going to look at some of the questions, but there is a really wide range, everything from, is your parent a citizen, to have you ever participated in genocide? Like it's in depth. So this is part 12, which sometimes called the yes or no question or section. And so you can see, first off, the first 3 questions are about claiming to be a US citizen, registering to vote, or have you ever voted? Of course, it is illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. And something that I point out to my students is that when they're applying for a driver's license, it's really easy to accidentally register to vote, especially if you're doing it online. A little box pops up And if you just click yes on it, it's like one button, and then they've accidentally, committed fraud. So I just tell my students to be very careful, especially in the instance of applying for a driver's license online, to not register to vote. One of the things we talk about in class is how to be a good neighbor, how to be involved in your local community. And I really try and push that, voting is a really essential and great part of being a US citizen, but you must wait until you are a US citizen. So just a side note about that driver's application, because it is very easy to accidentally click yes to it. Part 4 is, do you now have, or did you ever have, a hereditary title or an order of nobility in any foreign country? This is quite a mouthful, like I'm sure many of our students understand, like, are you a king? Are you a queen? Are you a princess? But learning what a hereditary title or an order of nobility means is part of what we do in class, is try and break down this, vocabulary that is not common and probably very unfamiliar to a lot of students. Similarly, with number 5, have you ever been declared legally incompetent or been confined to a mental institution? We try and explain that this isn't, maybe you go to like a therapist or anything like that, that this is a legal classification from the courts. So in class, I really try and break down these terms and make them more comprehensible to the students, so that when they're filling out this paperwork, they, one, know what it's saying and how to respond to it, but they also know how to explain it. And I'll get into that in a little bit. This is questions 45 to 50, which are probably some of the ones that I receive the most questions about, particularly, 48. If the law requires it, are you willing to bear arms on behalf of the United States? Are you willing to perform non-combatant services in the armed forces? Are you willing to perform work of national importance under civilian direction? And it's tricky. I mean, I always say you should talk with your lawyer about this. Personally, I don't know. Would I be willing to bear arms? It's a tricky question, So when your students come to you with specific questions about how to answer some of these tougher questions, you can explain to them, what does bear arms mean? To use weapons, to commit violence on behalf of the state, but you cannot say no. You can't say yes, just say yes, just say yes. Please don't do that. Like, they can have a more informed discussion with their lawyer, and they can say, I am a pacifist, I reject violence, this makes me uncomfortable. And their lawyer can better advise them on how to answer this question. And I should also say that, saying yes or no to any of the questions, doesn't automatically prohibit the student from becoming a citizen. The government is aware, one of the questions, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? For many, many people, this answer is yes. And it's not because they have any anti-democratic beliefs, but everyone in China, must be part of the party. So, the students should always be truthful, even if, it feels like they're being interrogated or as if they've done something wrong, Not every answer must, fall in line with how they think they should answer. It should just be the truth. And so, as I've said before, they must fill it out alone. We make flashcards because there is a lot of unfamiliar vocabulary. And I try and reinforce to my students that the officer will most likely or may check for comprehension. And so I always encourage students to answer fully. For example, if the question is like, do you have any order of nobility or, hereditary title? If the student just says, no, I do not, the officer can then ask, well, what's a hereditary title or order of nobility? And, put the student on the spot, and then the student must give a definition. So that's why I encourage students to give a full answer that demonstrates they understand the question. So that I would encourage them to say, no, I'm just a regular person, no, I even joked with in my class, like, no, I'm just a commoner, no, I'm not a prince. And here in my example, in the question, were you ever involved with genocide? Instead of just saying no, because then the officer could say, well, what's genocide? They should just say, no, I've never hurt anyone. No, I don't believe in violence, something like that. So because the officer is, some of them are, some officers are different from other officers, and some of them are really trying to, some of it that they seem like they don't want anyone to become a citizen. So I just always, really encourage my students to give the fullest answer so that the officer cannot try and, catch them not able to make a definition, or not able to answer one of their follow-up questions. It's better just to say it all, in their first response. We also, a lot of these questions, especially in part 12, have this present perfect tense. Have you ever? Have you ever done this? Have you ever been this? Have you ever, blah, blah, blah. And maybe it's not the most common verb tense. So we really try and, there's not a lot of grammar in my citizenship class, but what we do talk about is this tense, and that it is a time frame of their whole life. One of the questions is, have you ever been involved in any organizations, clubs? When a student asks me, like, yeah, I was in a soccer club when I was 12, does that count? And yes, it's have you at any point in your life, And so it might seem silly, but they're really looking at the students or the applicant's whole life. And, there are a lot of very personal questions and students may not know how to answer them. And so I encourage my students to write these down, keep a list as we're going through and learning about the N400. Every one of my classes, we start off with a different part of the N400 and review it. So yesterday in class, we looked at the part about their families. So what is either of your parents a US citizen? Yes or no? If yes, when did they become a citizen? What's their A number? What's their country of origin? That sort of thing. So I think it's helpful just to really keep organized with this process and keep a list so that when they have their appointment with the lawyer, that they can just ask all the questions that they have. Okay, before I move on to civics, does anyone have any questions about the N400 and this component of the interview?
No.
Okay. So the second component of the interview is civics. And, I can honestly say that I probably wouldn't have passed, not at all, this portion if I took it before I started teaching it. It's not incredibly complicated questions, but it's certainly not information I have interacted with since, 9th grade law and government class. So I tell my students, I don't think a lot of Americans would pass this test. So you should really be proud of yourself because, it can be tricky, You know, I couldn't remember. I was like, how many senators are there? I'm like, okay, wait, who did write the Federalist Papers? You know, could not remember. American history was never my strong subject. I studied medieval history in college, so, you know, not the 18th century, but I can talk about the 12th. So the civics has a list of 100 questions on American history and government. The test will have 10 random questions from that list. The applicant must answer 6 correctly. And once they have answered 6, that portion of the test is complete. So they don't need to answer another 4. Just 6. And once they've answered 6, that's done. And then they will be asked to read one question in English, and then they will be asked to write one sentence in English. Often the sentence is the answer to the question, and applicants may try up to 3 sentences. So all of the words on the test are from a list available to the applicants. Every word, even the, of, our, little words, every possible word that they could be asked to read or write is from a list available to them. And it's pretty simple. So here, if they have to read what was the first state, then they would often have to write Delaware was the first state. Or read who is the father of our country. They would have to write Washington is the father of our country. I also want to say that little errors like forgetting to capitalize Delaware or Washington, no periods or question marks, even forgetting little words like the, of, is, something like that is fine. They're looking for overall comprehensibility. Are they able to read, and that the sentence that they are reading is essentially the sentence that they were given? You know, so in class, you know, I do try and correct them if they misspell Delaware, or, you know, if they left out a the before the United States, but that's not going to fail them. So now we're going to look a little bit deeper into this portion of the test. I've also included a link here to the PDF guide that has all of the civics questions and answers, all of the reading and writing test vocabulary, as well as some more resources and a link to the citizenship part of the USCIS website. So here's some of the civics questions, and you know, they're organized in different areas. So here we can see the American government and subcategories of principles of American democracy and rights and responsibilities. And we looked at this question last night: what is the supreme law of the land? And one of my students said, oh, it means, you know, everyone must follow the law. All laws you must follow. And I was like, you're not, you know, they're not giving me wildly inaccurate responses, but the answer that you must give is the Constitution. So it's easy to see how students can get tripped up by, they're like, okay, well, what is the rule of law? What do laws mean? You know, but they only need, you know, to say the Constitution. You know, I forgot the first 3 words of the Constitution when I was teaching this class. I was like, what is it again? We the people, you know, so we really try and reinforce, you know, why we have the government that we have, why the principles of self-government were important to the colonists, and how that is reflected in, you know, the founding documents of the country. I also want to point out, as you can see on question 48, there are 4 amendments to the Constitution about who can vote. Describe one of them. I have several students who are, you know, they're great students, and they're like, well, I know all 4. And then they list all four. And I'm like, please don't do that in your interview. You know, I know that you can answer all of them. I know that you know all of them, but it's important to only say one, because you're only being asked to say one. And so that demonstrates you understand. And it also keeps you from making a silly slip up, you know? So you can see some of the other questions here. One, responsibility only for US citizens, such as serving on a jury or voting in a federal election. One, right only for US citizens, voting in a federal election or running for federal office. Here we get into more the 1700s and the 1800s, you know, what happened at the Constitutional Convention? You know, name one of the writers of the Federalist Papers. I had to ask my coworker, I was like, who is Publius? Like, this sounds like a Latin name, like in the Roman Republic. You know, Publius was the, you know, pen name that Madison Hamilton and John Jay wrote under sometimes, you know. You know, name one war fought by the US in the 1800s. Name one problem that led to the Civil War. So in our class, we sort of go through history sequentially, so that they're learning, you know, why we had the revolution, what were problems for, you know, the early states, why did the Civil War happen, these sorts of questions. Also, there are questions about geography, you know, name one US territory, Guam, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, that sort of thing. Symbols, why does the flag have 13 stripes? Because there were 13 original colonies. And holidays, when do we celebrate Independence Day? July 4th. And as I was saying earlier, always encourage students to keep it simple. You know, if they ask name one, name two, only do as much as they ask, just so you're showing that you understand the question and you're preventing any accidents that are unnecessary, you know. So before we start talking about the resources, does anyone have any questions about civics? So this is the textbook that we use. It is called Voices of Freedom. We now have the 5th edition. I currently have the 4th. It's almost exactly the same, except they've updated some of the relevant details, you know, who is the Speaker of the House, who are the Supreme Court justices, that sort of thing that will change. It is incorporating history, civics, a little bit of grammar, and some ideas for enrichment activities, and it is the main resource we use. We do teach it out of order a little bit, which I was explaining to my students last night, because they were like, teacher, why are we, you know, we started in chapter 8 and now we're in chapter 3. And we do this because the textbook begins with our forms of government. You know, it has some geography, you know, Canada's to the north, Mexico's to the south, but then it gets into, you know, the 3 branches of government, separation of powers, checks and balances. And then it goes into colonial era, you know, the Revolutionary War. I usually teach the Revolutionary War and the colonial period first. And this is because I think it's important for students to have that historical context, you know, that so they understand why we have the system of government we do before we learn what the system of government is. That way, when I say, you know, we have the system of separation of powers because we don't want one branch to get too powerful. And we know that early Americans were fearful of a strong, central, powerful government because they just waged a war against a monarchy where they felt that they were not represented and had no voice. So do you see, it's giving them that context for why, you know, there is some sense in the way that Americans do things, and this was their reasoning in it. I also want to say that if any of you are tutoring citizenship students, that Nicole Johnson, our Director of Special Programs, which is Citizenship and Digital Literacy, she has a massive YouTube playlist that has all kinds of videos going over the different sections of the N400, different parts of the interview, and topics from the civics test. We also have a Google Classroom that has homework ideas, activities, more videos. You know, we usually try and funnel our citizenship students into classes because of the terms of our grant. We still do have some student and tutor pairs meeting together for citizenship help, but by and large, if you have a student that is interested in applying for citizenship, we try and enroll them in one of our classes just so that they'll count for our grant. But of course, if you are tutoring a student and they're interested in citizenship, I can help you access all of these resources and help support you. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Yes, Norma. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Thank you. During the course of this, there were at least two, maybe there were more than two sites. Would you please send those to us?
Sure. The PDF link to all of the civics questions and
This
all
was,
of that.
and the
Yeah.
YouTube with the lessons.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll send those all separately outside of the, I'll send the PD or I'll send the PowerPoint and then I'll send the links separately in the email as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, I hope that this has given you all a little insight into citizenship, and please feel free to reach out to me or any of your coordinators if you have further questions.
Okay, thank you so much. This is
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Maya.
Of
Thank you.
course.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.